Hello, good evening. Welcome to Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folk tales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, practitioner, keeper, mayor of Pepper World. I'm so excited. Today we will discuss tales of the underground, tales of the worlds below ground. I think about this all the time. I don't know about you guys, but I think about what is under our feet all the time. I've heard stories. I mean, there's all kinds of stories, right? But I've heard stories of like the ice caps, like in the center of the ice caps, there's a hole that goes into a secret cavernous space in the earth where there's thermal vents and tropical atmospheres. I've heard rumors that there's aliens down there, who's to say? But if you think about logically, the Ice Age, a lot of the planet was covered in ice, and it would make sense that humans would live underground. And in the past few decades, they're finding more and more underground civilizations where there are cities that are fully underground. And it makes sense, right? Especially, let's say if you're in a super hot desert place or even a super cold place in the north. It could totally be possible that you would live underground. But what if because I know that there are pockets of Earth that are fully cavernous, like naturally, not human-made. And what if there was a civilization that just went for thousands of years with no knowledge of the world above? And they had no idea of our existence, as we have no idea of theirs. Or is it that some people do know, and the secrets are kept from us? Now, obviously, my conspiracy brain goes a little bit wild when I think about this because, who's to say? But I feel like it's more possible than not. And one thing that is definitely true is that we can say for sure that in the past, there was human civilizations that lived primarily underground. So that is real. And from there, we can only ask questions. But that's what this episode's about. We're going to get deep into it because there are some crazy fucking stories out there. One honorable mention that I just want to bring up is once when I was working on a weed farm, there was this crazy cat there named Aaron. Shout out to Aaron. And he was a nut. But honestly, Aaron was fun. Aaron had really good stories. But anyway, he was from fucking like where like North Carolina or some shit. Or was it Virginia? I don't fucking know. He was from like, he was a white dude like from some part of the hickish parts of the US. Okay. Anyway, he had some buddies that were like from Appalachia. And basically they would tell him these stories that there was like a town somewhere in Appalachia that used to be a mining town. And the entire mountainside had been mined. So like all the mines were dead, and it had almost become a ghost town. There were still like a couple hundred people who lived there, but since I think it was like booming in the 40s or some shit, and now it's basically like kind of like the hills have eyes situation. And long story short, anytime the police show up there, because they don't have a police station like in this town, it's so small, but anytime like the police show up there to look for someone or to whatever, chase down a lead, everyone will be gone. And the story goes that because these people descend from the miners, that they all know like secret tunnels in the mines, and they can just disappear at a moment's notice. And also, a good point that this dude brought up to me is that like a lot of the missing person cases, specifically like missing children, happen within like 50-mile radiuses of areas that allegedly have like mining, like ex-mining areas, or even just alleged entry points into the earth. So even though there may not be like documents of people knowing about underground tunnels, that there are incidences of alleged caves that lead to tunnel systems, and in the 50-mile radius there'll be more missing persons reports. Some people think it's a human trafficking thing. Some people, I think fringe people might say that there's like flesh-eating giants. But like, my point is that regardless if this is real or not, there is a lot of tunnels and caverns under our very feet, almost anywhere we go on the planet. And we don't really know what's going on down there, and we really don't know how to get down there. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to kind of cover just a little bit of everything, and I'm really excited. I love thinking about this. I love talking about it. So let us begin. Oh, hold on. I have some black rose tea. Shout out Blue Willow. This is a black tea from Yunnan province, and they put in dried wild rose from Yunnan in oh my god, I'm so sorry guys. I was trying to put my teapot down and it hit my teacup. I've decided I'm gonna name my teapot Kisma, which means moon face. It's also the name of one of my best friend's gardenia plant. Her gardenia plant is named Kisma. Shout out Kisma. Shout out to my friend Bisaraha. But I've just been looking at my teapot, and it looks like a robin's egg colored moon. And I've always wanted to name her, and every time I name her I can't remember it, So like I feel like it's not the name. So Kisma's been sticking. So her name's Kisma, and she has a twin sister named Kisma who is a gardenia, which I love. Okay, let's have a little cup of tea. Black rose. I'm just going to describe, because when I drink this tea, I feel like I can see Yunnan. I taste the minerals of the soil. A misty morning with dewdrops forming on wild rose petals, light pink fading to a creamy pink. Ancient tea plants swaying in the breeze. The rocky mineral soil, dry but full of nutrients. That's what I'm drinking right now. It's really fucking good. Blue Willow tea spot, people. Get yourself some tea. Drink some tea with me. Okay. The first story that we are going to discuss is the story of the little green girl of Saint Martin, also known as the Green Children of Woolpit. This shit is a crazy ass story. So there are two accounts of this particular story. And these are real accounts. These are two men that lived in this area in England, and one of them wrote about it during the time that it happened, and one of them wrote about it, I think, like 100 years after, like looking through this man's journal. Okay, but so like this is not like, when this was recorded, this was not like a tale or a folk tale. A man wrote this as a historical event. So this happened during the reign of King Stephen. So this would be between the years 1135 and 1154. Exact year unknown, but that's like a 20-year period. So this is the 12th century. We're talking about the 1100s in England. So this is like This is pretty old school. So this is after the Roman conquest, obviously. And this is like right before the Dark Ages are really going to set in. So we have a lot of small villages all over Britain with colloquial languages. I'm pretty sure, actually, what year did the Canterbury Tales reference? Let's look up the Canterbury Tales, people. Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales were in the year, around 1387. So we're talking like 200 years before Canterbury Tales, okay? I'm just trying to like paint a little picture for you about where we are in time and space. So here we are in England. Let's just call it around 1140. And a man from this little village of Woolpit. Oh, and okay, wait, I actually want to talk about why it's called Woolpit. So apparently it comes from Old English wolf pit. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but I'm committing. Basically, they would catch wolves here, and they had these like old like stone pits. They were like like kind of like pits, but they were like square. They would build like stone square pits. I think they might cover them with like brush, you know, like maybe with like branches, but they were designed to catch wolves, I guess, to keep them out of the town. I'm not sure, but that's like why this village was called Woolpit. Okay, so outside of Woolpit, a man was wandering through the forest, and he comes across 2 crying children. They're very, very young. There was a boy and a girl. The boy was super young. We're talking like maybe 3 or 4. And the girl was a little bit older, perhaps 5 or 6. They were crying, sitting by one of these wool pits. Some stories say that they were emerging out of one of these wolf pits. And their skin was green. Green fucking skin. Okay, so this guy is like, what the fuck? He's trying to talk to these kids, but the kids don't speak English. They're rambling in some other language that he doesn't recognize. So he leads them back to his village, the village of Woolpit. And immediately they become the spectacle of the town. So the man who wrote this down was not the man who found this. He like lived in the town of Woolpit and recorded this story. So the kids were put up in the house of Sir Richard de Calne. He was like basically he was knighted, right? He was like a local, what's the word? I don't think he was a lord, because his name was Sir. It means he was knighted. So yeah, he was a higher ranking fellow of the area. Some people believe that maybe he was the man who found them. That is unclear, but the kids were put up with him, presumably because he had some wealth. And like I mentioned, these kids had green skin. They don't speak English. Everyone is so weirded out by them, but everyone comes to like look at them. And it's pretty clear that the kids are like really skinny. And like specifically the little boy was really sickly. So immediately everyone's trying to get them some food, but the kids refuse everything. They will not eat. And as the story goes, as they were in this house, the house of Sir Richard, the children looked out of the window and saw raw beans growing on the vine, raw broad beans. And so the children ran out into the garden and started eating these raw beans. And this was literally the only thing that these kids would eat. They were just eating all these green beans. And eventually, not long after, the little boy eventually dies. And by this point, the girl had started to eat the other foods that they were cooking for her, you know, the classic, I mean, I'm assuming like meat and potatoes. Actually, no, probably not potatoes, because potatoes were brought over from the New World, if I'm not mistaken. So, I don't know, fucking rhubarb. I don't know what they were eating back then. Maybe, maybe cooked beans, dude. I don't fucking know. Okay, so the little boy dies, and now the little girl is starting to eat food, and they decide, at this point she's kind of there to stay, so they give her a name. They name her Agnes Barr. And in about a year or so, Agnes masters English, and she begins to tell everyone their story, the story of her and her brother. So Agnes explains that she and her brother came from a land where the sun never shone and the light was like twilight. She explained that there was another land not far away from hers on the other side of a river, and that land was more luminous and they could see the light emanating from that land. Her land was known as Saint Martin's land. She said that there everything was green. She also mentioned that St. Martin's had churches, but otherwise was very different than England. But they had many things there. They had cattle, they had homes. We're talking like an underground city, dude. So she says that she and her brother one day had been herding cattle, and they heard the sounds of bells, and they followed the sound until eventually they found themselves in a series of tunnels. Pause. Other versions of the story are a little different, and they say that their parents had told them when they were herding the cattle to never cross the river. And that one day, out of curiosity, they did, and that's where they found themselves in a series of tunnels. Either way, now the two children found themselves in a series of tunnels, and they decide to keep wandering, but as time passes, they lose their way and they become completely disoriented and lost. They have no idea how to get home, and they start panicking. Poor Peppers. That's really stressful, and they're super young, dude. So here they are in these fucking dark tunnels, and they are just walking and walking for what seems like forever, possibly days, until they finally saw a light in the distance, a light at the end of the tunnel. And they followed in its direction, and it led them into the forest where they met the man from Woolpit, who found them and took them in. So, obviously, as she's telling all the villagers of Woolpit this story, everyone's intrigued, and of course she actually wants to go back home. So they allegedly went back into the forest with her to the cave that the man found her in front of, and they tried to go through the caves to get to St. Martin's, but they could never find their way, and there was a shitload of tunnels. And it's kind of sad. After she kind of just became a regular lady, she became a live-in maid for a wealthier man in town. And the last thing that is reported of her is that she was allegedly a wanton and impotent. Yeah. It sounds like she what? I kind of love, during that time, if you're not a wanton and impotent, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? If I went back to those times, they would probably burn me at the stake, but I'm okay with them, because if not, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? But that's just me. Okay, so our girl Agnes, that's all that's written about her. There's really not a bunch of information. And so let's get into it. Of course, as you already know, so many historians have all these reasons explaining what this could be about. So a really big one is that some historians think that this is a folk tale, which is fair. The only thing that's weird is that why would a man write this down as an account? Do you know what I'm saying? This was not a regular folk tale of the area. But part of why the man thinks this is because In England, there seems to be other folk tales that are maybe loosely based off of this story. And so that's kind of where he gets that idea. And of course, as stories get older, they kind of become tall tales. So that's why he thinks that maybe this is made up. But some really interesting points that some historians made is that this story is like an allegory for children coming from the land of the dead / the other world, or the land of fairies. So one of the reasons why they think that is because in a lot of Mediterranean cultures, beans were seen as food, the food of the dead. A big reason is because for some reason beans were a symbol of your ancestry and connecting with your ancestors. So for example, in Rome, people would often offer fava beans to Hades, as a fava bean represented dead souls. Other people would often leave beans on the tombs of their ancestors, or they would even chew or like suck on beans as they like lived their life, because like I mentioned, they represented a connection to their ancestors. So that is actually a really interesting tidbit that I thought was really interesting. Another really like kind of silly, like almost disrespectful theory, but it's definitely hilarious, is that some historians suppose that this really happened, but that the children were poisoned with arsenic. And so this is a thing, like if you have enough arsenic poisoning, apparently your skin can turn green. Oh, wait. Pause. I forgot to mention. This is huge, crucial information. Once the little girl started to eat regular foods, her skin turned white. That's a very crucial piece of information. I'm so sorry I forgot to mention that. Okay, so when Agnes started to eat all the regular cooked foods that they gave her and not just raw beans, her skin turned white, right? Okay, so this is why one of the theories is that they had been poisoned with arsenic, which is why the little boy died. And the second part of this theory is that these kids could have been speaking Flemish and could have been from Scandinavia, because when Henry II became king, which was at the end of King Stephen's reign in 1154, there was like wars happening throughout Europe. And it was possible that these children were poisoned by their parents so that they wouldn't have to see war, and that the gibberish the kids were speaking was Flemish. I honestly think that this theory is a little bit wackadoo, because like I get it. I get that like these people in England maybe like weren't super worldly in the 1140s, you know? But like they said it was an unknown language. Like do they like if there was Flemish people, if there was people speaking Flemish in the general area, like would they not have recognized Flemish, or like loosely recognized Flemish? And like like if these kids actually came from the underground, but I guess that's what these historians are saying, like it's an allegory for them coming back from death because their parents poisoned them, blah, blah, blah. To me, this is not really adding up. This is not feeling real. Another important honorable mention, an important thing to note, is that there is, in fact, a condition called chlorosis. And this is a condition that can occur when essentially your skin turns green, and this is due to malnutrition. So for example, if you're not getting enough nutrition and say you're only eating green beans, it is scientifically possible for your skin to turn green. And of course, with proper nutrition and a change of diet, your skin will return to its natural shade. So is it theoretically possible that Agnes Barr truly was from an underground city called St. Martin? Yeah, it's fucking possible. And specifically, I want to mention that in the last few decades, scientists and archaeologists have found caves and cities underground. One honorable mention is a cave in Vietnam called Son Doong Cave. This is a vast, giant cave. It is considered one of the biggest caves in the world by volume. It has an underground river, people. It has an underground river. There's also parts of this cave that have little cracks so that little tiny beams of sunlight can come in. And because of that, when you're in the cave, it has like a twilight lighting scheme, which kind of checks out, right? Just that little crack of sunlight can create an entire ecosystem. However, there's other parts of the cave where they have kind of, what's the word? Collapse, like the ceiling has collapsed. So there's small pieces of the cave that have full sunlight because of that, and there are forests in there. There are full growing adult trees in this cave. There are so many ecosystems, and they've discovered that there are some like animals, creatures, kind of like spider-like things that only occur there. Like this is a fully functioning ecosystem with a fucking underground river, dude. Like this is some real shit. This was discovered in the 90s. Also, another example is the city of Derinkuyu, also known as the city of Elengubu. And this is in Turkey, in a region called Cappadocia. I'm sure some of you know how to pronounce that correctly. So literally, this is a fully underground city, like similar to an ant colony. It even has almost like a Indiana Jones-esque rolling door, and it's so geniusly designed that you wouldn't need like a super strong man to use it. They used like brilliant, I don't even know, like science to like create this giant stone rolling door that seals the city off to the above world. So this is like a giant underground city. Like if you can imagine an ant colony, imagine that. So this is all human made. It was large enough to shelter 20,000 people plus livestock, plus food storage. There's literally chapels, wine storage, oil presses, stables, cellars, and more. The list goes on. Like even vents for people to have fires inside. Like this is a full-on functioning city. It is considered the largest underground city so far discovered in Turkey, but there are other underground cities all around this area, and some of these cities actually have roads underground that connect them. What? If you haven't seen Ancient Apocalypse, I highly recommend. There's a lot of other mentions about underground temples, and Graham Hancock, who is brilliant, also mentions that it would make sense that during the Ice Age that humans would be building underground. I mean, it just literally makes so much sense. Another thing that he talks about in this documentary series is that a lot of pyramids in the Americas were built over time and were originally built over underground chambers, and they would build a small above ground chamber, and as the years go by it would get taller and taller and taller and taller. So these pyramids, almost all Mesoamerican pyramids, are built above underground chambers, and a lot of these underground chambers haven't been discovered but are being discovered as time goes on using like what's it called, like sonar technology. I think that's what it's called. Okay, so this is reminding me of episode 1, which is the episode about labyrinths. If you haven't listened to that episode, check it out, but I'll just do a brief summary of a specific labyrinth that I mentioned, which is known as the Ancient Labyrinth of Egypt. And this labyrinth, it's actually so sad. It was kind of discovered, but Egypt hasn't allowed excavation of it because they claim that there's like water table issues. I mean, I think it's just kind of like, what's the word? I think it's kind of iffy because for the last like 2,500 years, Egypt has been colonized by outsider nations. You know, Egypt was colonized by Rome and then by the Islamic empires. So even now, Egypt is not really like natively Egyptian anymore. The majority of Egypt has really been, you know, colonized by Islam. And I do wonder how much of the government decision making is about like protecting the integrity of the archaeology versus maybe other political agendas. And again, this is like me speculating. I'm literally just a random guy and I don't really know anything, but I just selfishly like need to know. I need them to figure out where the labyrinth is. And they basically know where it is. They just won't uncover it. So this labyrinth is said and reported, there's drawings, there's accounts that this labyrinth was underground at the foot of the pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara, at Hawara. And so what they say is that there was two pyramids. There was one that was underground and one that was above ground, and then they mirrored each other. They were like replicas of each other. So Amenemhat ruled around the year 1800 BC, okay? So this is about like 2,000 years before the story of the little green girl, right? So this labyrinth is described in writing by the Greek historian Herodotus, who claimed that he visited there. And he wrote that that the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. It has 12 roofed courts with doors facing each other, 6 face north, 6 south, in 2 continuous lines, all within the outer wall. There are also double sets of chambers, 3,000 altogether, 1,500 above and the same number underground. We learned through conversation about the labyrinth's underground chambers. The Egyptian caretakers would by no means show them, as they were, they said, the burial vaults of the kings who first built the labyrinth and of the sacred crocodiles. The upper we saw for ourselves. They are creations greater than human. The exits of the chambers are the mazy passages hither and thither through the courts, were an unending marvel to us. Do you hear that? Over all this is a roof made of stone like the walls, and the walls are covered with cut figures, and every court is set around with pillars of white stone very precisely fitted together. Near the corner where the labyrinth ends stands a pyramid 240 feet high, on which great figures are cut. A passage to this has been made underground. Get the fuck out of here. So this particular pyramid and the labyrinth that was above ground is said to have been dismantled during the Roman and Arabic conquests of the area. But my point of bringing this up is that it seems like this was in the full scope of the ancient human technology to build successful underground chambers and theoretically to live underground. Now, obviously, like with the story of the little green girl, ancient Britain seems like it was kind of behind the times and was by no means as advanced as like ancient Egypt. However, when we listen and think about the story of this little green girl, she's also eating fucking green beans and is malnourished. So this like suggests that maybe her civilization like wasn't super advanced. So this is like all consistent. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not even necessarily saying that St. Martin's was human built. Like, this could very possibly have been a naturally occurring chamber. and at one point could have had contact with the outside world, and then contact was lost, or maybe there was some kind of war and then they stopped making contact, or maybe they had been there since the Ice Age. Like, literally, who fucking knows? And like, theoretically, it is possible that maybe there are people that live underground who at one point their ancestors lived above ground and for some reason moved. Oh, the peppers are at it again. Okay, if the peppers are barking, I'm going to take a water break. I think it's fully possible. I think it's fully possible that humans could be living underground and possibly living underground for so long that they could forget about the above world. Oh, this is actually kind of random, but related. This reminds me of in the 7th grade, we watched a documentary in school in my science class, and it was called like the Cheddar Man, and it was a British documentary. It was like a BBC documentary. I think about it all the fucking time. But like, in a nutshell, this documentary was about DNA. That's why we watched it, because we were learning about DNA. And the documentary was made in the 90s when like DNA was like cutting edge technology. And in the documentary, there was a science teacher in the town of Cheddar in England. And in the town of Cheddar, they had a Cheddar Man. That's what they called him, the Cheddar Man. And basically, he was like a mummified man that had died in like a cave in the town. They had like a cave system in the town. And fun fact, that's where cheddar cheese comes from. They would age cheese in the cheddar caves. Do you see where I'm getting at right now? Okay, so this man, the Cheddar Man, had gotten lost in these cave systems, and I think he basically lost his way and died. And so like, at some point later in history, they discovered this Cheddar Man, and because of the air in these caves, there was something about like the vents that it like had preserved his body, so he hadn't like decomposed. He was basically like a mummified person, and his skin had become leather, and he had like little leather shoes on and like a cute little like furry loincloth look. But anyway, so they call this man the Cheddar Man. So in this BBC documentary, the science teacher is talking to his classroom, and he's like, okay, well, we come from a small town. Theoretically, one of us could be descended from the Cheddar Man. And like, DNA was a new thing. So basically, as an experiment, this high school class in the town of fucking Cheddar swabbed their cheeks to take a fucking DNA test to see if anyone could be related to the Cheddar Man. And guess what? The high school motherfucking teacher himself, the fucking science teacher, was related to the Cheddar Man. And it was such a good documentary because at the end it like became really philosophical. Like the science teacher like goes to the caves because they had like kind of turned the caves into like a museum kind of, and there was like a plaque and a railing, and he's like leaning over the railing and like looking at the place that his ancestor had died, and he was like, who are we to know who we descend from? Like, here I am, living in the town of Cheddar, not even knowing that my ancestor's the Cheddar Man. And it really made an impact on me. But now that I'm an adult, I didn't even consider that like in the town of Cheddar, there's fucking cave systems. Like, what if the Cheddar Man had lived in the caves and got lost, almost like the little green girl? Right? Like, what if he was actually like trying to get back into the caves and got into a wrong cave that had like a toxic amount of some weird gas, or like whatever, he just like fell asleep to nap and died of starvation. Like, I don't know, but this is me just like pontificating here, but I'm just having like a Pepe Sylvia moment. I'm just like drawing red lines between all of like the weird information that's stored in my head. If anyone can find this documentary about the Cheddar Man, please let me know. Okay, so this brings me to another story about the underworld, or I should say the underground. This is the legend of the ant people. So this tale comes from the Hopi people, and the Hopi people are a Native American group of people from the northeast Arizona and parts of New Mexico region. And this is the story in a nutshell. Again, I'm sourcing this from online, so I am by no means like telling their story. This is a very abridged version of what I could find. And I just really want to reiterate this in all stories that I tell, that oral traditions are an art form that has sadly been obliterated in many cultures through colonization throughout the last 6,000 years. And there's only so much research can do that can't make up for a grandmother or grandfather telling these stories. Okay, so in a nutshell, this legend or story goes that at one point on Earth, there was a cataclysmic fire that was burning the entire world. And in their time of need, the Hopi people were helped by a group of people which they called the ant people. Interestingly, though, in the Hopi language, they called the ant people Anunaki. In the Hopi language, Anu means ant, and Naki means friend. So that sounds exactly like Anunnaki, which is an alleged alien race. I talk about them in Introduction to Aliens Part 2, I believe. And just to like keep this super, super brief, the Anunnaki are considered to be an alien race / the gods of the ancient Mesopotamian cultures. Now, to be clear, in ancient Mesopotamia, they did not consider themselves to be religious. They did not have a word for religion. They considered their gods to be real, and they have stories about them as people who descend from the sky. And they understood Anunnaki to mean from those who came from heaven, / those who came from Anu, and Anu was the god, the father god of this race. But what's interesting is that throughout history, a lot of different cultures mention the Anunnaki, and allegedly a lot of religions are like recycled stories about the Anunnaki, kind of rebranded, if you will. These peppers won't stop barking. I really just don't want to close my window though, because it's so hot. It's like still 90 degrees right now, and it's like 8:30 and it's 90 degrees. I'm going to keep the window open. I'm going to just beg that the peppers stop. Right. Okay. So the Anunnaki, according to some accounts, like not all Anunnaki are allegedly evil. They're kind of legendarily thought of as evil in the sense that they came to colonize Earth and used humans as a slave race. But like Enki is kind of the darling. He is the Anunnaki that kind of loved the humans. And I've heard like fringe stories of some Anunnakis branching off and like being fond of humans and caring about them. And this could actually just be a wild coincidence that the Hopi people call the ant people the Anunnaki. I just wanted to like kind of pontificate about that. So they claim, the Hopi people's story goes, that the ant people guided them into their underground civilization, and they provided them shelter and food until the earth became inhabitable again. So presumably this could have been like a few generations. And interestingly, in the White Sands National Park in New Mexico, there have been fossilized footprints, human footprints, that were discovered in 2009. When these footprints were radiocarbon dated, it was determined that they were from about 21,000 years ago, between 21 and 23,000 years ago. That's a long fucking time. This is also longer than most historians claim that humans have been, like, intelligent. I don't know. It's weird. But one thing to note is that about 23,000 years ago, this part of New Mexico would have been a lush landscape full of vegetation. And what is interesting is that in the book of Enoch from the Bible, they also talk about a, quote, comet coming to Earth and destroying the planet with fire. And using the timeline of the book of Enoch, this is also approximately about 23,000 years ago. So this would line up with the alleged story of the Hopi. And it's just an interesting thing to think about, is that a lot of historians claim that the birth of civilization was 6,000 years ago. And perhaps there was great civilizations before that, and through great cataclysm, they were erased. Truly, if you have not seen Ancient Apocalypse, that's what the whole show was about. Graham Hancock talks a lot about archaeological evidence that points to the idea that humans could have been very, very advanced and very intelligent, and about every 26,000 years, a huge cataclysm will often happens, which kind of wipes out humanity and it starts over again. So that's just something to contemplate. Graham Hancock is a brilliant man. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention about the ant people is that in parts of New Mexico and Arizona, they have found multiple pieces of cave drawings and cave art from the Hopi people and other tribes in the area. And some of these cave drawings have humanoid beings, some being human, but some who are not human. Humanoid in the sense that they have 2 feet and 2 arms, but some of these humanoids are bigger than humans, some are smaller, but with like antenna-like things on their head. So this could be depictions of the ant people. And this actually brings up another story, a personal story, or a story from my life. I had a coworker once at this crazy job that I had, and he grew up on a res, and he was obviously Native American. He grew up on a res outside of Death Valley. And he was telling me that his grandfather would tell him stories when he was growing up of the lizard people, and that many, 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 many years ago, their people had been in great danger. And the lizard people offered to shelter their people, and that they had lived underground for a few generations in peace with the lizard people. So just, that's what I'm just saying, like, there could be shit underground. And that also makes me think about the fucking US nuclear weapon testing in the fucking 40s and 50s, dude. Think about this. Okay, like, this is me. This is my mind going like a million miles a minute, but just hear me out. In the fucking 40s, the very first nuclear lab, it was a nuclear weapons lab, and it was set up in Los Alamos in New Mexico. And there they executed multiple nuclear tests underground. And this is in an area that they call Area 49. Now, of course, everyone accepts that these are just random nuclear tests and they did them in the desert because it's the desert. But like, what if they are discovering weird humans or like truly creatures underground? Like, if I know anything about white American men, they would be like, let's blow it up. Like, let's kill them. Let's massacre them. Like, we don't like this. Do you know what I'm, like, you know what I'm saying? That's why, like, ultimately, let's just say, like, let's just be the devil's advocate and say that every single mythical creature was real. Dragons, unicorns, like all of this shit was real. Would not humans go out of their way to kill them? Or let's be more specific, like white men? Like, I really, if they were in fact real, I can't imagine that people would allow them to live, you know? Like, just in my lifetime alone, so many, quote, like apex predators have become extinct. Tigers, lions, like all big cats are extinct. Buffalo were almost entirely wiped out during the white colonization of the Great Plains. Elk were almost entirely wiped out. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, and these aren't mythical creatures. But like, what if in a couple thousand years our descendants think that elk are mythical creatures because they have no evidence that they existed? Or what if they find evidence and it's destroyed? Like, anyway, this is like the type of stuff I think about. But like, just in this hypothetical universe that the ant people are very real, what if a group of white men had discovered them and were freaked the fuck out, and in a 2-for-1 tested an atomic bomb and also blew up an underground civilization? I don't know, just saying. This type of stuff just really trips me up. I also, the reason why I think about stuff like this is because, like, there's just certain situations that I think about that really feel like overkill. Like, when it comes to war, I am 100% anti-war. But in like if I had no heart, I can put myself in the shoes of someone who thinks that like it has to be done, quote unquote, okay? But then there's like the overkill, you know? So like, for example, the nuclear bombs tests, like they set off one nuclear bomb and it worked, but they did more. Why do more, right? That to me is like what I would consider overkill. And that's why my mind goes to like, is there like a second agenda happening? So another example of that I think of a lot is I think a lot about the Library of Alexandria. Allegedly, the Library of Alexandria was the biggest library of all time, with script stories from all around the world, from the ancient world. And the library was almost burned down a couple of times, and it was specifically the Romans that were like getting the worst. So there are legends that a huge amount of scrolls were relocated from Egypt and hidden in Baghdad underground. I'm telling you. And so what happened to Baghdad in the early 2000s? It was fucking leveled. They bombed the shit out of that. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, that's fucking overkill. I'm anti-bomb every single day. No bomb is okay. But when you level an entire city that is an ancient city that should be protected as like a World UNESCO Heritage Site, like, why? You know what I'm saying? Why? And there's a part of me that wonders, like, are you trying to get to some ancient scripts? Are you trying to destroy ancient scripts? Like, I'm just asking, you know? And that reminds me and brings me to our next story, which is the story of the Kandahar, the Kandahar giant. This one's a doozy, you guys. So the Kandahar giant is a story from Afghanistan, and the idea of giants in Afghanistan is actually a very, very old concept. But it kind of reemerged in the zeitgeist, and specifically like internationally much more recently, due to an American military presence there. As we all know, the US had a lot of troops occupying Afghanistan, and there are still plenty there. And there is a specific story that I'm going to tell you that's pretty crazy. But I do want to mention that there are stories in Afghanistani culture about giants, and they've existed for a long time. Some are like totally folktale stories, like almost along the lines of like the tales of the 1001 Nights. But there's also local stories. I actually did meet a girl once at a party, and she was Afghanistani, but she had been raised in the US. Her mom was like born and raised there and had emigrated when I think she was just born. So out of curiosity, I asked her, I said, did you grow up hearing stories of the giants, of the red-haired giants? And she looked at me and was like, how do you know about that? And I was like, this is what I do with my free time. I just like look up, I like look up folk tales and stories. And she was like, I always thought my mom made that up. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, dude. There are some real stories about red-haired giants in the hills there. And she was like, yeah, my mom would always tell me about flesh-eating giants in the caves and in the mountains of Afghanistan, and that it's like not safe to wander alone because you could be eaten by a red-haired giant. It gives you chills, huh? Okay, so that's just some background. But I'm going to tell you a alleged account from 2002 of some American soldiers. Wait. One last thing, actually, I forgot to mention. In these alleged stories that like circle around Afghanistan, it is said that these giants are 13 feet tall. They have bright red hair, like not like ginger hair. Like as humans, when we think of red hair, we think of it's actually like orange hair. But according to these stories, it has red hair. Like we're talking like truly a true red hair. They also are said to have 6 fingers and 2 sets of teeth. Okay, wait, pause. This also reminds me. Okay, I literally just mentioned my coworker who told me about the lizard people. He also told me another story that his grandfather had told him growing up, that long ago there were giants they would eat human flesh, and they had 6 fingers. And that it was a custom in the Americas, if you saw a person on the horizon, you would raise your hand, spread your fingers, and you would wave. And that it was saying, I have 5 fingers, I am human. And by doing that, when you see someone on the horizon, a human would know that that is how you greet people from afar. So let's say you were like trading with someone, or like even someone in your group went super far away to go look for something. Like you would greet people far on the horizon and say, I have 5 fingers. And he was also saying that's why in a lot of old human cave drawings, they would often trace their hand. And it was literally like a signifier, like this is a human dwelling. I have 5 fingers. And his grandfather would tell him that these giants, these 6-fingered giants, would eat human flesh. And this shit is kind of fucking crazy, because this is all the way in the Americas. And right now we're telling a story from fucking Afghanistan. And in this story, they have 6 fingers and they're 13 feet tall. Now, I don't want to go full on like ancient aliens on you, but like some people do believe that there are underground tunnels that connect the entire world, like even under the oceans. Like who's to say? But is it possible that there are a bunch of cavernous underground pockets? Fuck yeah, there is, dude. Okay, so sorry, let's get back to the meat of our story. So this is the story of the Kandahar giant. So this takes place in 2002. This is allegedly a real story. It is said that there was a U.S. tactical team And they were on, quote, Operation Enduring Freedom. Blah. Dude. I fucking cannot. I cannot. Okay. So, yeah, these bros are on motherfucking Operation Enduring Freedom. And of course, they are in a constant battle with the Taliban, and they're specifically in the Kandahar province in Afghanistan. So, a bunch of these fucking bros, they're on this fucking mission, and this particular area that they were patrolling this particular day was in a very remote mountainous region in the Kandahar province. And after a few hours, they had gone radio silent, and eventually they were considered missing as they had not responded for quite a few hours. So the US military sends a group of special ops to look for them. So now they're combing these remote mountains in Afghanistan, and the unit comes across a cave. The peppers are freaking out. The unit comes across a cave, and in front of it is US Army equipment scattered all around, but there are no sign of the men. And at this moment, they see a giant emerge from a cave, and with a spear, it immediately kills one of them. Metal. I'm living. In 30 seconds, they bring it down with sustained gunfire. Yeah. This checks out. They just start spraying the fucking giant. So immediately they radio this in, and allegedly the US military took the fucking corpse out. They airlifted it out with a helicopter, immediately hid it, and covered up the story. And part of how this came to the surface is that one of the soldiers in the special ops eventually spoke out about it anonymously. He calls himself Mr. K. And he felt that people had the right to know. So naturally, the US military fully denies this. And in some senses, that makes people think it's more real. Now, like, granted, this totally could be made up. But what's interesting is that this is a part of Afghanistani culture. And there are stories that mothers tell their children before this even happened about being careful to wander the woods because of the giants that live in caves. And now I'm thinking about this story that my friend told me on the res in fucking Death Valley, dude, about flesh-eating giants. And like, I'm just saying, this is like totally hypothetical, but if these caves are giant and they lead to cave systems, like, how would we know what really lives in that shit? Like, how could we really know what lived there? You know what I mean? And like, so since then, I mean, this was in 2002. So we all know that after that, like, the US military stayed there for a long time and just sent more and more fucking military equipment. And so, like, is it possible that not only was there a political agenda of control and fascism, but like also another agenda of like eliminating quote unquote like mythical creatures? You know, that's just something I wonder. Or even just like to genetically test them, or like turn them. What if they turn that giant into a military soldier, or like cloned it? Do you know what I mean? Like, who knows what the fuck they're doing? I don't know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, like I said, if from what I know about men and like, let's just say humans, and specifically like the blueprint of colonialism, and that's like transcultural, right? We're just talking about like colonialism in general. If they were to come across anything that they deem a threat, and they don't know what it is, they're gonna fucking kill it. So like, who's to say that there wasn't once a thriving community of giants and that they've all been killed by humans, or 90%, or whatever. You know what I mean? Okay. So, lastly, I just wanted to tell a little folk tale from Afghanistan. I'm gonna have some water, hold on. This is your reminder, drink some water, please. Okay. This is a little folk tale from Afghanistan, and I wanted to share it. It does involve a giant, so it's super, super cute. And it's just it's a little short boy, but I thought it would be a really cute little story. Because I like, it does make me sad sometimes when I'm just telling like these short recaps. I do love the oral tradition. And this brings us to the King's Vigil. This is a folktale from Afghanistan. I think I said that like 5 times. Okay. There once was a king with 3 sons. On his deathbed, he asked his 3 heirs to take turns praying at his grave every single night. His sons agreed. The next day, the king died, and he was buried that day. And so, the first night after his burial, the youngest brother, the youngest of the princes, suggests to his oldest brother that he should be the one to guard the grave on the first night and to pray for their father's soul. The eldest brother would rather not, and so he nominates the middle brother to do it. And the middle brother would rather not, so he nominates the youngest brother. And so begrudgingly, the youngest prince takes the shift for the first night to pray at the grave of their father. And so for the following 2 nights, this pattern repeats itself. The 2 older brothers would just rather not. And so the younger brother does this by himself, until on the 3rd night, there was a ferocious storm. And during the storm, a terrifying giant appears. And it says, "I smell the smell of human, and wherever you may be, I will eat you." It's very fee-fi-fo-fum. So the young prince immediately hides behind his father's grave, and he waits for the giant to approach as the giant sniffs out the human scent in the air. And when the giant gets close, the young prince jumps out and he grabs the giant by the hair. The legend goes that giants are powerless when you pull them by the hair. The giant immediately surrenders, and he promises on the gem of Solomon that he will not harm the boy. Now this is giving very jinn motifs, right? Like the giant appears in the storm. This is very jinn behavior. And then also promising on the gem of Solomon. I covered this in the jinn episode, but it is said that King Solomon was a trained sorcerer, and he worked with the supernatural community and converted a lot of them to Islam, but also created seals to be able to seal the ones who didn't believe in Allah. So this is just a really interesting like mention here that this giant is promising on the gem of Solomon. This would indicate that he is a believer, which wouldn't make him like quite as evil, like not a demon, right? But this is like jinn. This is me using like jinn terminology. So what I'm sensing is that this story may have really come out of like the Persian zeitgeist and like traveled, and like now it has like specific details. It's been like impregnated with local culture. This is like what I'm assuming. Okay, so the giant, as a gift to the prince, and obviously to like have him let go of his hair, he plucks 3 hairs off of his head and he gives them to the prince. So these are 3 red giant hairs. And he tells the prince that he can burn the hairs if he ever needs help. And either the giant himself will come or he will send something or someone in his place to help. And again, this is totally jinn behavior. There are stories from the 1001 Nights, you gotta check it out, where some jinn will help humans and give them a piece of hair that they can burn to be summoned. Okay, so with this, the prince takes these 3 strands of hair and he returns home to his palace. Very quickly, he forgets all about the giant because his 2 older brothers are fucking lazy, and in just a matter of days, they are leading their kingdom to ruin quick. And so literally the next day, the people of the kingdom grow very unhappy. They're really disappointed. I mean, literally, like, these princes are so fucking lazy. So they decide to appoint a new king and they dismiss the 3 brothers from the palace. And with nowhere to live and nowhere to go, the 3 brothers travel quite a long distance until they come to a foreign kingdom. And in this foreign kingdom, there are 3 beautiful princesses who are all conveniently unmarried. And to win their hand in marriages, to win their hands in marriage, the princesses have a little task set up. We love a task. Make them work for it, bitch. Okay. So the task they have for any suitor is that they must ride their horse to the tower in town. There's this giant tower. So they have to ride their horse 40 steps up a tower, beat the drum at the top, and then ride back down on their horses to the palace. Now, based on what, it's kind of ambiguous here, but I think that this is like almost like a vertical tower. So I think you'd have to ride up and down so fast because I think it's so steep that like on the way down, you could like fall and die type of thing. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. So the 2 oldest brothers agree. They're like, yeah, like we'll fucking marry princesses. Like this is like an easy way for us to get our fucking positions back. So the 2 brothers agree. However, when they arrive to the tower, they see like hella dead bodies of all these suitors, all these fucking dudes who had tried to marry the princess, being like, yeah, cool. They fucking failed and had fallen to their deaths, presumably with their horses, which is super sad. So the eldest brothers were like, nah, we're cool. However, the king of this kingdom had decreed that anyone who failed the task would be strung up and hung. And so the older brothers had literally agreed to this shit. And so the young prince is now stressed. He doesn't want his older brothers to die. And so he devises a plan. The older brothers like wait in the crowd because this is like I guess like a daily event. So like men line up. It's like the entertainment of the town. So the youngest brother sneaks away from his older brothers without them noticing. And he walks up to the, I guess, like starting line to complete this task. So there's a huge crowd of people. And he takes out one of the giant hairs from his pocket and he burns it. And in an instant, a magnificent horse rides up with incredible clothes on its back, like decadent clothes. And so the prince really quickly throws these clothes on and he does it. He fucking rides the horse to the top of the tower. He bangs the drum. And he rides down so quickly and without a scratch on him. And immediately, once he makes it to the bottom, he rides the horse back into the town and goes to the little place that they were lodging. And he changes he changes back into his regular clothes. So later, his older brothers come home and they tell him the story of some strange prince who had completed the task and had ridden away inexplicably. So, of course, the next day, the prince does the same thing. He goes to town with his brothers, he sneaks away. This time he burns the second hair, and a different horse rides up with a different set of immaculate clothes. And so he throws the clothes on, he completes the task for a second time and rides away immediately, goes back to their little inn, and he changes clothes. And again, his fucking idiot ass older brothers come home, and they still don't even realize their younger brother is literally hooking them up. And they're like, yeah, it's super weird. There's like some random prince who keeps riding away, blah, blah, blah. So finally, on the third day, the young prince does this whole little charade again. But this time, after completing, he rides up to his two older brothers and he tells them the whole story. And at this, they are so embarrassed. They feel guilt with their laziness and basically that they've just been bitch made. They apologize to their younger brother, and the younger brother had a kind heart. He was like, it's cool, I love you. And literally, because he had worn 3 different outfits with 3 different horses, he had convinced his entire kingdom that these 3 separate brothers had each completed a task. Dude, your fucking little bro hooked you up. Are you kidding me? So with this, he gives each of his older brothers one of the other horses that he had summoned. And in their fancy new clothes, they ride up to the king's palace and they claim the 3 princesses as their wives and lived as successful, wealthy men. Oh, how nice. But again, what I find so interesting about this story are the very obvious jinn influences. It almost seems like in this story that the giant is more akin to a jinn, which I think is really interesting. I think it's pretty obvious that this is like formatted from like a derivative of the 1001 Nights. Obviously, the 1001 Nights is a compilation of stories from all over the ancient world that became accumulated through, you know, hundreds of years of storytelling, and in different areas there would be like colloquial changes. So it could be that some stories in Afghanistan would kind of like interchange the word jinn for giant, or would just, you know, completely erase jinn and just kind of use giants as these creatures. But the one aspect of this story, and the reason why I told it that I do find interesting, that doesn't overlap necessarily with jinn, is that when the giant first appeared, he had mentioned that he smelled the scent of human and wanted to eat it. And that isn't really something that we notice with a lot of stories about jinn, like them having a interest in eating humans was never really like a thing. Like maybe like taking joy in murdering them, sure, you know? So I thought that was a really interesting detail. But like I mentioned, from some of the people I've talked to, I've heard that their parents would tell them that it was said that there was giants in caves known to eat people. And this story feels like of a slightly different vibe. Like the giant loves to eat people, but also has the powers of a jinn. Who's to say? But with that, those are some stories of the world below ground. If you have any personal stories, if your parents used to tell you stories about an underground world, please email in. I would love to hear your story. My email is in the show notes. It's esotericaandnonsense@gmail.com. If you like my podcast, if it is possible in whatever app you're listening to it, if you can review it, I really appreciate it. If you like it, tell a friend. I'm a younger podcast. If you would like to support my podcast, I do want to keep making episodes and I want to be making them regularly. And as of now, I'm doing this for free. So if you want to support my podcast, I have a Patreon. I have merchandise. All of this is in the show notes. Besides that, I really hope that you're taking good care of yourself and that you're drinking water and eating good foods. Life is too short and humans can be so mean. So I hope that you're living your life how you want to and having as much fun as you can, because it's not worth it. And it's not worth dealing with fucking assholes, dude. Moral of the story is, if you follow your dreams and choose to have fun every day, most likely you're not the asshole. You actually become someone who inspires others and someone who spreads love, even if you're not meaning to. When you have good vibes, it changes the world. So anyway, there's my little pep talk. Love you guys. Over and out.